There's only a few games that I simply couldn't stop thinking about when I played them. Games that I feel are 10 out of 10s. Those games are Persona 5 Royal, Dark Souls 3, and Bloodborne. I've decided to make a video on why Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3 in particular are such amazing games. In this video, I'm going to talk about what I love about these games and what I think makes them such incredible works of art. Specifically, the bosses, the atmosphere, and the way they were developed. To that end though, here's the big spoiler warning. Stop here, like right here, if you want to experience these games fresh, and I definitely recommend doing so for Bloodborne. FromSoft games have long since had incredible cultural relevance, from memes of warm dogs and the furtive pygmy so easily, to game reviews likening every single game to the Dark Souls of... Though the tongue-in-cheek comparison of any difficult game to Dark Souls is somewhat inappropriate. Dark Souls isn't that hard. It's just a game of patience and pattern recognition. Dark Souls is considered hard because of its challenging sequences which pit the player against a seemingly insurmountable set of enemies in less than fair ways. But the more one plays, the easier it gets. You keep throwing yourself into the challenge over and over again until you master it, wondering how it was even tough for you in the beginning. It's about failure and patience, and this cycle of failure and getting back up again is represented best by the intimidating and impressive bosses of the Soulsborne series. The bosses of Soulsborne are massive challenges for the player. Most of the time. Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne bosses showcase gameplay that's a real process to learn, but rewarding to master. Everyone remembers their first time getting smashed by Vort of the Boreal Valley, some more than others. The boss designs in general are, to put it formally, rad as hell. I mean, just look at this shit. He's got 2 flaming swords. And here's a giant skeleton in the dark. That's just cool. What I believe to be a critical part of the experience, though, in making the bosses from these games so legendary, is the music. Kitamura Yuka composed the majority of the music for both games, and her genius really shines. The boss themes in Dark Souls 3 befit their battles quite well. For example, the Dragon Slayer armor is epic and imposing. Vort is a tense high energy. The dancer is slow, understated, and haunting. The bosses of Bloodborne are similarly well designed and musicked, but most people will tell you that the best bosses that FromSoft have ever done are in the final installment of the Dark Souls series. And most people are right. Dark Souls 3 has far and away the greatest volume of quality boss fights. In these games, there are good bosses, there are great bosses, there are amazing bosses, and then there are the bosses you'll never forget. And no, I don't mean like that. Get out of here. Let me begin with Ludwig, the Accursed, the Holy Blade. This boss is a work of art. Ludwig represents the struggle against beasthood for humanity, a central theme in Bloodborne. As Zully the Witch puts it, From usually deals largely in the decline of majesty, and Bloodborne especially is focused on the fragility of humanity. In a triumphant display, Ludwig the Accursed, the most horrific beast of all, claws his way back to his former glory. This harrowing storyline is told through one of the most technically challenging fights FromSoft has to offer. Ludwig is incredibly aggressive, and leaves the player with little room to breathe. The fight can feel as if you're only able to dodge his frantic attacks, with no chance to fit in your own. His second phase, in which he recomposes himself, remains just as aggressive, except this time, he's got a giant fucking sword. This is the strategy section of the Bloodborne wiki on Ludwig, followed by his moveset. This boss is so difficult that he's actually infamous for causing players to straight up quit the Old Hunters DLC, being the first boss that you encounter. This horrific monstrosity is gross, unsettling, and combined with the movement and attacks FromSoft has provided him, plain terrifying. And that's what the Ludwig track inspires, pure terror. I encourage you to go listen to the full track in its entirety. It's only about 5 or 6 minutes and it really is a masterpiece. I often joke when talking about this piece that if I had composed it, after finishing I would just quit music forever, because I don't think I'd ever be able to top it. It inspires all the right emotions for fighting a boss as horrifying as Ludwig. Excitement, fear, anxiety, and sorrow. Wrapping that return to glory storyline in a boss fight as difficult and high octane as Ludwig makes it much more memorable compared to just hearing about it in some snippet of dialogue. Additionally, the arena you fight him in is literally littered with moving corpses and drenched in blood. It adds to the horror and disgust felt by the player as they fight. The marrying of gameplay and story with the most emotionally evocative track in all of Soulsborne, plus a nasty, hellish arena, provides an excellent payoff. The overlaying of all these elements offers a superior immersive experience, and suffice to say, one of the best bosses FromSoft has ever made. But this boss isn't my favorite. Sister Friede is the best Soulsborne boss. She's critically relevant in the lore and a plain badass to boot. The Ashes of Ariandel DLC essentially tells the player the story of Sister Friede and Father Ariandel. You encounter her early in the area, when you cross the bridge and enter the Frozen Chapel. Friede obviously draws inspiration from Crossbreed Priscilla, also from the Painted World, both with her weapon and in some of her fight mechanics. But Friede is cooler. Many players on the wiki agree. I mean, let's check the comments. On second thought, let's just move on. Awesome weapons like Friede's dual scythes, in general, are a part of establishing a good atmosphere. There are a lot of great weapons in Dark Souls, but the best are found in Bloodborne. The trick weapons were a great idea. Not only do their transformations allow for more options in combat while maintaining the speed and fluidity that Bloodborne embraces, but they also provide an opportunity for establishing a unique world visually. For example, the Threaded Cane, which transforms from a cane-like sword to a nasty whip. The Whirl Saw, a circular chainsaw. Or the Saw Spear, which transforms from a hack. I don't even know what this is. I mean, that's just Ludwig's sword. A sword that you shove into a big brick and smack the handle that transforms into a bigger axe. Just an incredible transformation on that one. That's my favorite weapon, by the way. All these weapons have unique animations for their attacks. Their brutal, cobbled designs and badass movesets help found the gritty atmosphere that permeates Yharnam. The combat system, too, works toward this end. In the official Bloodborne guide, Miyazaki mentions that the health regain system was intentionally made to encourage the sense that you're fighting a life-and-death struggle. It invites you to take a more fatalistic approach to fighting, encouraging that to-the-death feel. Despite the low number of weapons compared to Dark Souls 3, each of the weapons in Bloodborne feels distinct and unique. In Dark Souls 3, there are a ton of weapons, which gives the player more choices, but half of them are just swords, and are we really gonna count 15 talismans? Really? The weapons do add to the atmosphere of Dark Souls 3, though, inspiring medieval fantasy with a focus on darkness. Speaking of darkness, the world of Dark Souls emphasizes rot and decay. You get this sense as you explore ruined architecture, happen upon festering corpses, and fight tired, decrepit bosses.
Oh dear. Another dogged contender. Here too, if you like.
While the world of Dark Souls 3 displays a hollow beauty, it's a lot more linear and spread out than previous games. Many players dislike that, and it's in this regard that Bloodborne shines once more. Yharnam and its surrounding areas feel connected, even despite its physically disparate levels of reality, dream, and nightmare. The central city is the capstone piece, and you get the sense that you're exploring every crevice of this doomed town. What I personally find the most interesting is the verticality of it all. In the first area of the game, Central Yharnam, you explore from disgusting sewers filled with wretches to the top of a bridge where you fight the cleric beast. But the verticality of the entire world itself is what speaks the most to me. You begin in Yharnam, but then descend to Byrgenwerth, below which lie the labyrinthine catacombs of Tumeru, containing the cursed old blood. So you descend to the origin of the beastly blood, and later ascend to the upper cathedral world, and even fight a great one there, Ebrietas. You go further in the DLC, through the research hall and Maria's astral clock tower, to the Fisher's Hamlet, and even further up where you finally battle the Great One Kos, or some say Cosm, at the end and the top of the world. It's my interpretation that this verticality represents the spectrum of beasthood versus knowledge. You have the blood-starved beasts at the bottom of Old Yharnam and the origin of the blood in Byrgenwerth, and as you move up through the city, you inhabit the realm of those still human. Here you move beyond, higher, towards the Great Ones and the mysteries of ascension and evolution. Finally, you're met with the corpse of Kos and her orphan. The frenzied beasts lie in blood and mud at the bottom of the world, while the ethereal Great Ones exist in knowledge and dreams at the top. Or, that's what I think. And it's because of FromSoft, and more specifically Miyazaki's approach to storytelling, that my interpretation is valid. The legend goes that Miyazaki, growing up in Shizuoka Prefecture, between Nagoya and a barely known city called Tokyo, fell in love with Western stories. His family being poor, he would go to his local library to read books often, some were in English. But there was only one problem. He didn't really know English very well. So he read English fantasy fiction, and he filled in the parts that he didn't understand with his own imagination. Of course, he's better at English now, but that interpretive philosophy remains. His games are intentionally designed with ambiguity and holes for the player to fill in themselves. He encourages, nay even finds it critical that players draw their own conclusions. In the official guide to Bloodborne, he mentions that the game was intended to be inscrutable and interpretive. As Redgrave says in the foreword to the Pale Blood Hunt, there is no answer to Bloodborne's story. Bloodborne is a game that asks what you think. It asks what your story is. What do you make of the unknown? So, when they say a game is a Souls-like, what do they mean? That it has extensive, thoughtful lore that requires work to understand? That it tests the player's patience and learning ability with awesome bosses? That it's just plain hard? That it has a robust RPG stat system to allow for any range of role players to make any kind of build they want, like a strength or dex build? Again, for the 6th time. The truth is that FromSoft games are really their own beast. A game that replicates some aspects and claims to be a Souls-like, like Code Vein, may have some great RPG and character building, but lacks the ethereal Mile-Deep pool of lore. Others might have the vast lore like Hollow Knight, but they lack the build and combat variety that FromSoft games usually provide. It's thanks to the personal touch of Miyazaki and his unique role as creative director and president at FromSoft that Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3 are the masterpieces that they are. And as hard and frustrating as they may be sometimes, they're still two of the greatest games I've ever played. Truly, Dark Souls is the Dark Souls of Souls-likes.